Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's webinar. We're very pleased to welcome John Gillespie from the Office of Rail and Road, who will be delivering this session today. We also have with us David Porter, who is the Vice Chair of the IOSH Railway Group, who will be introducing the session. But before I hand you over to them, I just wanted to mention a few things. So firstly, for those of you who haven't attended one of our IOSH webinars, I'm Ben Pollard and I take care of the technical aspects of these sessions. Any problems and I shall try to assist as best as I can. So on your screen then, most likely located at the top left hand side, you'll notice a small bar with some written options on them, which are chat and Q&A. If you have any technical issues or audio problems and need to message me at any point, please use the chat option. If you have any specific questions for John relating to the content of the session, please use the Q&A option and ask your questions here. You can open and minimize these boxes at your own leisure, and should a message be sent out to you at any point, it will flash orange. So with all that said, I'm going to hand you over to David, and he's going to do some introductions, and I hope you all enjoy the session.
Welcome everybody again to this IOSH Railway Group seminar on the Risk Management Maturity Model, RM3. RM3, as you know, is the Office of Road and Rail's benchmark for health and safety management in the rail industry, and the ORR have expectations that an excellent standard should be achieved across all railway industry companies. However, recent years' reports by the ORR have shown that the RM3 ratings have stalled, and the Railway Group thought that it may be appropriate to refresh members' knowledge of RM3 and its relevance and value in their position. So we've been lucky today to get John Gillespie, Assistant Chief Inspector of Railways, to come and explain this to us. And so I'm going to hand over to him now, and he's going to go through the RM3 model. John.
Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time out to listen to a webinar on RM3, its purpose, structure, content, and benefits. What I'm going to cover is here on this slide. First, a word or two about my role, then something on the purpose of RM3, how it's structured, how then to apply RM3 within a business, the benefits that will accrue to any business from adopting RM3, and then some words about where you can find some further help and guidance. Before I go any further, the difference between a webinar and a normal presentation is that if you have any questions, we will take those at the end. If you just send them through the Q&A box, then David will filter out any difficult ones and will ask me only easy ones at the end of the session, so after the help and guidance part. First of all, a word or two about my role and some of the history of how RM3 came about. First of all, I worked for the Office of Rail and Road, the Assistant Chief Inspector of Railways, and my role includes oversight of the regulation of tramways, of TfL, including the London Underground, of the heritage sector, and by complete contrast, the new railways that are being designed and built, including HS2 and Crossrail. And also, I'm a member of the UK delegation to the Channel Tunnel Safety Authority, and that is a piece of infrastructure and railway which we regulate jointly with the French. So, very varied role that I presently have. The thing that ties them all together is health and safety management systems. You need one for each of these: the railways through the Channel Tunnel, the underground, tramways, even heritage railways. And of course, you need a management system for enabling the design of new systems. So that's my current role. What's been my role in terms of the genesis of RM3? Well, I've been fortunate in my career in being involved in the inspection of major hazard industries, chemical manufacturing sites, refineries and the like. And it's there that I first started using HSE's guidance of that time, HSG 65, Successful Health and Safety Management, which set out the key elements that any business being successful in health and safety management needed to have and would have, and those are policy, organizing arrangements, planning and implementing, systems for measuring performance and reviewing performance, and auditing. And those are displayed in the diagram in the bottom left of the slide. And I was familiar with many inspections where we would visit the company, talk with their managers, look at their processes, see the outcomes, and then we would write our reports linked to policy, organizing, etc. But the thing that was missing, and I think this is what RM3 provides, the thing that was missing was the ability to say to a business, look, this is what we found about how you are managing. Here is how you could improve in that area. And that's what RM3 provides relative to the HSG 65 POTMAR approach. It allows for a description of how to improve towards excellence relative to policy, organizing, planning and implementing. And it does that by breaking down policy, organizing, planning and implementing into a number of different elements, as I'll describe later on in this presentation. So that's been my role in RM3, and it was my privilege to work with a number of colleagues in ORR to develop RM3, particularly Ian Ferguson and Neil Anderson, and a large number of other colleagues who provided the input from their experiences of good health and safety management. And the RM3 model is available on our website, free to download. A word next about the purpose of RM3. Well, as I've already hinted, it's all about the people. I think that in the health and safety community generally, we sometimes talk a lot about systems, and we overlook just how important it is that the people are the most important part. They need to work within a system, but actually it's about those people. And that's what RM3 is focused on. It's focused on how to make sure that those people work within a system and work within that system to a level of excellence. Okay, and it fits in with the fact that within the European Union, we now have a principle in law that every business, particularly every railway business, has a safety management system. And the purpose of that system is that the people in an organization then use processes which they themselves develop that allow them to understand and then control their risks for the ultimate goal of making sure that the traveling public and the workforce are safe. And here I make no apology for reiterating the point about how important it is to recognize that it's not just the processes themselves that are the system, it is the people. It's the people using those procedures. And really, a management system is created by the people for the people and used by those people to keep others safe. And RM3 is a way in which we can know about how the people work together within the system and how to make that excellent. So for me, that's the purpose of RM3, that benchmarking, and from that, an improvement approach to the people working within the system. So it is all about management. And it's about having that management system for the people and then making the management system work so that we avoid the kinds of things that are illustrated here of what is clearly what you could badge as maintenance failures. But in actual fact, it's about the system of maintenance and the people within that system not being at the excellent level that has given rise to these illustrations of a tunnel and a signal post that has collapsed. And another way of looking at it is to say, well, the goal that we share within managing safety is less harm by the manager's actions, not just by good luck, but actually by the manager's actions. And I really like the Swiss cheese model of James Reason, which is illustrated here, where the hazard is on the right, and what we're trying to avoid is the harm that might arise from that hazard. And the illustration of each slice of Swiss cheese, which is the particular risk controls in place in order to prevent the harm from arising. And each of those risk controls needs to be managed by the people. And the whole rationale behind RM3 is the importance of getting those excellent, so that the holes in each of those Swiss cheeses are as small as they can possibly be. Smaller the holes, i.e. the more whole the slice of cheese, the less likely will your trajectory be from hazard to harm. So a word then about the structure of RM3. Here is the structure of RM3. Illustrated here, and as I said at the outset, it basically takes the idea that if you are managing health and safety well, you can discern certain characteristics of an organization that is managing health and safety well. And in the middle of this wheel, there are the main ones. You can see that there would be good policies, there would be good organization for control, there would be good ways of securing cooperation and competence and communication with employees, good plans, good implementation of those plans, and then at around about 11 o'clock on this diagram in the middle, good monitoring, auditing, and review. So all that RM3 does is it breaks down each of those bigger chunks into 26 elements: leadership, governance, written safety management system in the yellow part, allocation of responsibilities, good structure, good culture, good record keeping in the orange parts, worker involvement in the green area, number of different areas under planning, safe systems, good change management, good control of contractors, and then in the audit and the review area, the purple part, making sure that those reviews do happen and that there's learning lessons from any incidents. And RM3 takes those 26 elements and basically describes what excellent, predictable, standardized, managed, and ad hoc look like for each of those 26. And broadly speaking, as this diagram shows, if you're at excellence, the descriptions against the 26 individual ones will more or less be in the area of good, proactive, continuous improvement. Okay, and if you're in the predictable area, then most of the descriptors of the 26 will be around good delivery of those being predicted by the management system and good control of variation and change. In the standardized area, there's good practice into standard processes. Managed area, each group that works performs similar tasks differently. And under ad hoc, well, basically that means poor, uncoordinated, uncontrolled. And when in the document called RM3, you read the descriptors of each of those 26 elements, like leadership, like competence, etc., broadly, you will see those features coming through. So the excellence is proactivity, the ad hoc is uncoordinated and poor. Okay. So, what's RM3 all about? Well, it is a document but it's just a book with those descriptors in it. But where it becomes a tool rather than just a book on the shelf is where you use it to make a comparison of evidence about how your organization operates and about how the people working in your organization operate. And you compare it to those maturity levels, you know, excellent, predictable, managed, etc. And where will that evidence come from? Well, if you boil it down, evidence about how a business works comes from three sources broadly: talking to the people, to the managers, to the staff, from looking at the documents, either the processes that they have or indeed records of what they have done, and just by observing conditions. And this illustration on the slide indicates that depending on what kind of activity you as an individual might be doing, or say the chief executive might be doing if he's doing a safety tour, or an inspector might be doing if they are inspecting a business, if you're on the left-hand side inspecting a work site, then broadly speaking, you'll be spending quite a bit of time gathering evidence about the conditions, and then less so about the documentation. There may be permits to work to look at, for example, and a bit of time talking to the people on the site. Over on the right-hand side, if you're an auditor, say, or an inspector looking at a business in the round, you would be spending quite a bit of time with organised interviews with the people, looking at documents and observing conditions rather less. But all of that gives evidence, information about how the management system is working. Okay, and this slide then shows how you take the information you gather from talking to people, looking at documents and observing conditions, which might arise from, say, an investigation that you do or RAIB might do, from inspections that might be done by either ORR's inspectors or indeed by your own people, and audits done by your own people or externally, and they all give information about the management system. And then the RM3 model allows you to sort that information into the appropriate element that it is about. So say an audit might have highlighted some issues around the competence of staff. Well, that would then slip into and be thought about against the one in green about competence management. I beg your pardon, the one in orange about competence management. And then from that evidence and other evidences, you judge against the descriptors of excellent, predictable, managed, ad hoc, etc. And what you get out of it, what it equals, if you like, is this kind of diagram. Okay, so this is evidence that has been seen by someone's own eyes and then benchmarked against the descriptors in the RM3 model and then just plotted on this kind of diagram. So the diagram has excellent or level 5 at the outer circumference, and then level 4 predictable, next level 3, 2, 1 ad hoc. Okay, and this kind of diagram, after a while, you can get quite proficient at looking at them at a glance. So if I look at this diagram, and indeed I've taken a diagram like this into a meeting of a senior management team of a freight company, and I've said to them, what does that show you then? What does that show you about how good your business is? And most of the time, they will reply, number one, it shows our business is not excellent. And if they're really good, they'll say, it shows our business is not excellent yet, which implies some intent to get better, which is a good thing. And that indeed is what it shows. It's not excellent yet. But also, if you look at the way in which the evidence is translated into the scores, you'll see that over time, they've made an improvement. If you look at around about 2 o'clock in the written management systems and in governance, and they're really very good on competence management. They've fallen back a little bit in the subsequent year. And that tells you something about the business when you also identify over at around about 8 o'clock on the diagram that in terms of safe systems of work and asset management, they're actually only 1 grade above ad hoc. So to me, this says that this business is good at the written stuff, but not so good at implementing it on the ground. And therefore, it suggests that one of the areas that they should concentrate on for improvement is the management of things on the ground. And they could perhaps just sustain the work they're doing around their written systems. So this is just an example of how you can take the evidence as analysed and put into RM3 scoring and then use it to analyse how to get action, because it's all about action. It's not just about doing the comparison. It's not just about that. It's about using the comparison to seek improvement. So, how to apply RM3? Well, for me, I can just recount to you how, in my experience, certain businesses have come to us and said, well, we're thinking of adopting RM3. Where do we start? Well, as in any journey, you need to start with some anticipation and start planning and having a bit of a map to where you want to get to. You then need participation of the people involved in your organization, and you need to reflect as you're going along on whether we're there yet. So that's what any journey involves, and that is also what's involved in adopting RM3 for the first time into a business. But the key areas that need to be right, where you need to concentrate to make RM3 work for you, are actually around leadership. You need leadership for this. You need commitment to improvement. You need honesty about where you are and where you might want to be. And you need good collaboration between those in managerial positions and those at frontline staff positions. You need good communication, and you need staff who are competent, not only in the jobs they do, but also in RM3 and how that can be used if you're going to adopt it as your tool for improvement in your business. So let me just ponder a moment about the leadership aspect. So for me, in my experience, and say for a safety director or a safety officer in a business, key is to actually talk with the senior leadership to talk about how RM3 can actually make a difference to your business. And that involves, and has involved me, for example, in going into a senior management meeting with chief executives or whoever, prepared with the arguments as to why RM3 will be good for them. Talking about the legal argument, it's an aid to making sure that you're legally compliant. The moral argument, well, if you're legally compliant and you're running an excellent business, you're not going to hurt people. And indeed, there's a financial argument as well around, well, for most businesses, they maybe spend 70% of their costs on their people, thereabouts. Well, you want to get value out of that. And RM3 is a tool to get the best value by making sure that those people are working within the best system that they can to deliver your business objectives. So getting the leadership of a business aware of how this tool can benefit their business as a whole, and getting them behind it and committing to improvement. And a lot of businesses say, yes, we're committed to improvement. It's almost an article of faith, but then the actual tool to achieve that, in essence, we're offering RM3 as that. The other thing about this, just to ponder for a moment, is about honesty. You need to be honest that you don't just apply RM3 for the purposes of passing an exam. In fact, I've heard it said from one railway, oh, we applied RM3 and we passed. That kind of misses the point of what RM3 is for. RM3 is there not to give a pass or a fail. It's there to encourage, over time, improvement in the management capability of a business. Okay, and being honest about where you are is, I think, a large part of that. On competence of the people within your business in RM3, you would need some key people trained in how to use this language and how to operate it. That can be provided. We have some arrangements, which I'll come to later, about how to obtain some training. So in kind of summary, RM3 allows us, by us I mean, by the way, the inspectorate and the business themselves, to know where they are and where they want to get to. So on the left of this slide, is just a picture of words on the RM3 page about what a good, or rather what an excellent and predictable and standardized competence management system looks like. Well, if someone goes in and looks at the evidence from talking to people, seeing the outcomes, seeing the records, and thinks that they're in level 3 standardized, well, where you want to get to is described in level 5, the goal of excellence. And this is true for each of the 26 elements. So within one document is your benchmark and also your improvement plan. And it spurs actions for improvement, but it also allows you to prioritize and be effective. Because if you go in and you find, say, that the evidence points to you being predictable in competence management, but you find that in some of your other RM3 elements, you are, say, at ad hoc or managed, you know where to put your priorities, which I've tried to summarize in this slide about the benefits of RM3. But the first and key benefit, by the by, is that there's conversations between people about improving and about improving the health and safety management arrangements in a business. So that's a key benefit for me from RM3. It's a common language for discussing improvement in management. And indeed, every organization will be even better if they know what excellence looks like when they're managing their risks. Well, RM3 sets that out for the 26 elements. They know also where their strengths lie so that they can sustain that and keep that up. Where their weaknesses are so that they can focus on those and have a plan for improvement around those. Then what do they need to do to address those weaknesses? Well, that's set out again in RM3. So if you're at level 2, well, the plan is to get up the ladder to the goal of excellence, and the descriptors will help you to get there. And what will it look like when you get there? Well, again, that's described in the model. So RM3 provides all of those benefits to a business, and that goes towards the goal of legal compliance. It also allows a business to have a pathway towards being a high reliability organization in what it delivers. In other words, if you're excellent at health and safety management, which would probably be integrated with your management of other things, particularly the delivery of your product or your service, then you will find that you will be a more of a high reliability organization. It also allows for consistency and comparison of performance. You can do an RM3 analysis for business units within an organization and then compare outcomes. Or a company, say a group of companies or a holding company can look at its subsidiaries and ask about the performance levels against the common standard of RM3. And then you can also look at comparison of performance between similar organizations. So for example, train operating companies, they presently do some sharing, I understand, of their RM3 scores. And then, and key, it's all about the conversation aiming at improvement, about the strengths to sustain and the action to take. The action to take is the most important part. And it's all about improving management by the people within any organization. So, a summary then. The key to risk control is excellent management and leadership. And the diagram of the Swiss cheese model just says all that to me. RM3 is the common language for management improvement based on the evidence that people have relative to the benchmark set out in the document. And companies have used and will, I hope, continue to use RM3 to benchmark and improve their management towards excellence, where they're taking the evidence against the 26 elements, benchmarking against excellent, predictable, standardized. They then get their diagram of where they stand and have a conversation about how to improve where they stand today towards the goal of excellent tomorrow. A final word just about help and guidance. Well, first thing to say is that the RM3 model is free to download and available on ORR's website. Also available from ORR through my colleague Neil Anderson, whose details are given here, is the opportunity to have a conversation with him about any training needs that you may have. Because of recently having set up a partnership with HSL to deliver some training courses, HSL have decided to no longer offer those training courses with us. So from our point of view, we will now be organising any training that we might be approached to provide by railway companies, and Neil is your contact for that. Additionally, looking ahead, we wish to look at RM3 so that the model is reviewed quite thoroughly because it's quite a while since it was originally written, and although we have a new version on the ORR website, that new version is it's a cosmetic revamp with some obvious issues addressed, but we want to take time to gather views from practitioners using RM3 so that we can feed that into a review of the document and perhaps a revision of parts of it where we know already that it is good, but it could be excellent itself if it had a good review. So that's in the offing as well. So there we are on help and guidance. So that's my presentation. I'm pleased to see that some of you are sending through some questions. So I'm looking at my colleague David pleadingly that he will provide me with the easiest questions. But I think that Ben wants to have a word first before we go to Q&A about arrangements for feedback.
Yes, thank you very much, John. That was brilliant. Just a quick one just before we go through onto the Q&A. I am going to launch a poll. It's just going to have a few questions with regards to some feedback from the session. Just helps us to know where we're at with things and how we can improve on these webinars. So that should appear on your screen momentarily. And if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to just answer those questions for us, that would be brilliant. And then what we'll do is we'll go through some questions. So I'll be passing you over to David. So the poll has now been launched, so you should be able to see that. We'll now go and have a little look at some of these questions.
Right, yes. A couple of questions related from Say and Emma, who have some knowledge of Network Rail. And both comment about this tool called Dimensions of Safety, which I think Network Rail use. And basically there was some talk, I think, in the past of integrating the two tools together with discussions between yourselves and Network Rail. Can you say anything about comparing and contrasting them? Are they comparable? And is there anything about amalgamating them? Where are we going with that, John?
Okay. My understanding, actually, from having listened to a presentation given to us in ORR by Mark Carn, the Chief Executive of Network Rail, is that he wants Network Rail as a company to adopt RM3. So what follows from that, I guess, is that the company will need to analyze what it's currently doing in terms of its management system arrangements and look at RM3 and bring the two together. My understanding is that they are compatible, that what is currently done, and there shouldn't be a huge move necessary in order to adopt RM3 within the Network Rail business. So that's my understanding. I don't actually inspect Network Rail myself, right, nor am I responsible for oversight of it, but that's my understanding at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you very much, John. There's another question from Anthony, really sort of asking, well, how is RM3 being promoted within the rail industry. And a subsidiary question was, are we expecting any development of any sort of accreditation to this model, which seems to be the vogue with, the revamp of ISO 45001. Anything to contribute to that, John, on the position?
Okay, on the promotion front, well, there isn't a conference that I attend when I don't talk about RM3. And I also know that my inspector colleagues take time to talk about RM3 at least every year with their duty holders, because we sit down and have a conversation about our evidence and their evidence and what it shows about management within that business and how to improve things. So in terms of promoting it by the inspectorate and ORR, we do that through our own people, either attending conferences or in the dialogue with duty holders. We don't do much more promotion than that. I'm afraid we're not set up to have a big marketing department. That's not what our job is. But when the governance board for RM3 next meets, I'm sure that there will be a conversation about how things will now change, given that we are making a change in terms of the partnership with HSL, which is now being dissolved. And so HSL was active in some promotion activities, particularly around marketing training courses on RM3. So we will want the governance board to look at what are the next steps. And the governance board does have representatives from Network Rail on it, for example, and people from various train operating companies as well as ORR. So the views of the practitioners in the industry who are using RM3 will be taken into account in how to promote it in the future whenever we have a new strategic partnership in place. Your second question was about accreditation of RM3. Well, again, I think that's a question for the review that the governance board will be overseeing, because for me, I think it would be helpful for RM3 to have that kind of accreditation, but I think it would need to be looked at to see how it would be done and in what manner, and that would be for the governance board to look at. Okay, thank you.
All right, I've been saving this difficult question for you, John. Here it's just coming from Kevin. What would compliance with the new ISO 45001 stand rate against RM3? So do we know how they're comparable or in any way rate against each other? Okay. I think that's the gist of the question.
Okay, so the ISO standard is mostly around the process, the doings of things, yeah, right, and giving you a system for the doings of things. Yes. RM3 is also about the people who are doing those things in the ISO standard. Yeah. How well are they led? How good are their competence management arrangements, and so on. So for me, if you are doing well in relation to the ISO compliance, it seems to me self-evident that you're probably doing well if you are marking yourself against RM3 as well. Okay. So to me, they're compatible.
Okay. One thing that struck me, though, in looking carefully at what you were saying, that some of the 26 elements would be more relevant to some railway companies than others.
Indeed.
So a thoughtful application of ISO 45001 should lead you to the right sort of balance that represents your industry then, or your particular part of the industry. Is that right?
I would agree with that. Yes. Yeah. It's all about being proportionate, isn't it? I mean, that's what I quite like about the RM3 tool. It's as applicable to Network Rail as it is to the Bluebell Railway.
Yeah, applied in a proportionate, meaningful way, exactly. Intelligent way.
Exactly.
Okay. Another question from Say, you mentioned about your remit being inspection stroke auditing. Does that imply that this will now be included as part of a business excellence requirement, or is it a recommendation?
You were going to give me the easy questions. I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? I don't quite... Well,
yeah. You mentioned about your own remit being inspection auditing. Does that imply that this will now be included as part of a business excellence requirement, or is it a recommendation?
Okay. I think I'll interpret this question as being one about whether RM3 is the law or not.
Okay.
Okay. RM3 is not the law. There is no legal requirement that a business has to adopt RM3, just to be absolutely clear on that. Okay. And even though we as the inspectorate use it as our mechanism to analyze management systems, which are the law, by the way. The law is that you need to have your management systems.
Yeah.
We have put RM3 out there as the tool which allows both us and the duty holders to analyze together just how effective those are and how likely, therefore, they are day in, day out to be compliant with the law. But it is not the law to actually have RM3 within your business. I mean, obviously, we would quite like to have at least one person in any organization that we can talk this common language to. But we have found that both the inspectorate and the duty holders, particularly the duty holders, if they adopt it, they actually find that the business benefits accrue to them. But it isn't the law to have it.
Okay. I'm going to slip in a sneaky question of my own here, which is related, is that presumably if you're ad hoc, you're unlikely to be compliant.
Okay.
So does being average, there is a relationship presumably between the rankings and compliance. Did you get my understanding?
Yeah. Indeed, the very same question was asked of me by our own chief executive way back when we first devised RM3. He looked me in the eye and he said, well, John, I suppose this means that compliance is at this average, this standardized level, at level 2.
Yeah.
To which we replied, not really. That's not how we look at it. Okay. The interpretation here is to say, look, all management systems are human systems. Human beings' performance varies. It's bound to. But if you have those people performing well within a system that operates well, then the inevitable dips in their performance will not take you down to a level where you're likely to be non-compliant with the law. So at excellent, the likelihood is that you will be compliant day in, day out, but there may be occasions when you might not be, but they would be few and far between. At ad hoc, what we're saying is the likelihood is that by luck and over time on occasion, you may be compliant, but the likelihood is you will be non-compliant day in, day out. Do you see what I mean? It's about a likelihood score.
Just to reinterpret that, I think then you're saying, there's bound to be system variability.
Yes.
And so, and from day to day, but that also, I think, the implication of what you've said there is that if you're average, then you are factoring in there a certain judgment about the reliability of the process, not just the fact that it exists, but the fact that it's fairly consistent in its application.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
I would. Yeah. Okay.
Well, moving on then, another question. How does RM3 relate to the ERA SMS wheel? And that's from Kevin.
Well, the ERA SMS wheel is... Can
you just tell us what ERA is?
Right. Well, we must now call it the agency.
Okay. Which agency is it?
The European Railway Agency.
Yeah.
And so it has oversight of the national safety authorities, such as us in the UK. And one of the successes, I think, of ORR in relation to discussions with our European colleagues has been that the idea of RM3 as a maturity model allowing you to benchmark management systems has been taken up by our European partners and by ERA, by the agency. And their SMS wheel, though it has a few aspects which are a little bit different for European speak purposes, it is nonetheless basically the same kind of concept as RM3, and in fact was based upon and was seeded from RM3. So to me, they are compatible.
So the RM3 or the SMS wheel then would facilitate European comparisons against the same sort of European requirements.
And that's my understanding as to how the agency wants to use it.
Okay, that's interesting. Right, I've received no more questions to ask you, John. So is it time, I think, perhaps to, has anybody got any more questions out there that want to ask John before our time is up? Yeah, okay. Well, it looks as though, no. So just to sort of say, yeah, the main things are that RM3 is out there. It seems to be having sort of a universal application, although perhaps the NR position with the dimensions of safety is perhaps a bit unclear, and perhaps I'll take that away and we could come back to you on that. I think the contact for further work and the further workshops been clear there, so that's a good one to follow up. And so in conclusion, saying thank you to John for his time, Ben for coordinating things, and I hope you found it helpful. And do come back to us through the microsite if there's any other questions or follow-up things that you think the Railway Committee could. Oh, and there may be another question. We've done that, I think. Okay, all right. No, sorry about that. So I think we'll call that a day and say thank you very much, and hope to see you all again in a virtual sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, put those together.
Okay, so just a final point then. Obviously, thank you very much, John and David, for that. We are finishing a little bit early, so all that's left really for me to say is just thank you all for attending today. I hope you found it very informative and valuable. Obviously, the slides will be made available following the webinar, which I will be emailing out to all of you. We'll also have a copy of the recording put online, so again that will be emailed out to you so you can play it back at a later stage if you so wish. So just to echo David's thoughts, thank you very much, John, for delivering the session. Hope you all enjoyed it, and we hope to see you again at future webinars. I will be closing the session in the next sort of 30 seconds or so. So all that's left really to say is goodbye and thank you very much.